Salutations friends, welcome back to my channel. Today is going to be our black and oolong tea video. I have been deciding how I wanted to present this video to you. Did I want it to be a super long list? Did I want it to be chatty? And I decided to instead really choose the best representation of black and oolong teas in perfume within my collection because it's easier for me to show you, and talk to you guys about what I think about black tea and perfumery and get this tea series a-flowing. Or a pouring, I guess. So if you're interested in my thoughts and the discussion of tea in fragrance as a note, as a composition, as a major front and center note, not just in the background, but a tea fragrance utilizing black and oolong teas. If you want to know my thoughts, then keep watching. Two things. First, I have done white tea and green tea. If you would like to know my thoughts on those, I will link those videos below. And at this point, this will be the last true tea video. I will be doing an herbal infusion video in the coming week or two. But in order to really talk about oolong and black teas, I kind of have to regurgitate the redundancy of the difference between white, green, oolong, and black teas. If you do not care about the tea process when it comes down to the difference between white to black tea, there's a timestamp in the description box. Just click that little button and you'll go right to where I talk about the fragrances, because this part will probably be on the longer side. Not super long, but it is important to this discussion, because if you know me, when I see tea and fragrances, I want it to be properly represented. And green tea is properly represented. It is very well established as a find it anywhere, and I love it. White tea is so underrepresented, and when it is represented, it's usually a lighter, fresher version of green tea. And if you know how green tea and teas work in general, it's not how it works. And then we have oolong and black teas, and pu-erh teas as well. So ultimately, what I wanted to do is talk to you guys about how different teas are processed, and that way, when I really discuss oolong and black tea, since I'm talking about two teas in this video, you'll understand my thought process and why I chose what I did, and my thoughts and opinions on utilizing, first and foremost, black tea in perfume or oolong tea in perfume, but also distinctive black teas, like maybe specific different parts of the world or different grades or things like that. Or pu-erh, because that's different. And I really want to reference this part first when I get to the last part of the discussion, but this part will be long. Now, I will be doing an entire tea video, and these pre-videos, the white tea, the green tea, this tea, oolong and black tea, and then the herbal teas, I will be referencing those videos when I do that video, which is why I think it's very important for me to also give a lot of information in this video, because oolong teas and black teas, specifically in perfumery, I find to be very deeply connected when it comes down to like smell profile. So first things first, all tea comes from the same bush. That's right, if you want to be called a tea, if it's not an herbal tea, but a tea, it has to come from the Camellia sinensis bush. And I know I said that wrong because I've always said it wrong, even when I worked at the tea store. But it has to come from that bush for it to be a tea. Now, depending on the quality of tea, how it tastes, its nuttiness, its dryness, its effervescent green brightness, is it umami? If it has like an umami green vegetal sweetness, it's probably a shaded green tea. Is it something super dry, light, effervescent with a bit of grassiness? Maybe it's like a Darjeeling, something that's super flowery, golden tipi, orange pico. We're not going to get into that too much, a little bit. You know, different ways. Does it have full stems in it? Is it just the tea tips? I mean, like, when I do my tea video, I'm going to be showing you teas. But to be a tea, whether it's an Earl Grey black tea, or it's a white tea, or it's a green tea, or it's an oolong tea, it all comes from the same bush. So let's say we got 5 tea leaves, because I'm going to be mentioning pu-erh too. We're going to mention pu-erh too. We got 5 tea leaves right here. So you take this bush, this little leaf right here, and you pluck it, and no processing, really little to no processing. So the big difference between these guys right here, so white, green, oolong, black is oxidation levels, and then pu-erh pretty much just throw this in a cave for a decade, and then we'll get into that. Picked and dried, virtually no oxidation. Health benefits are vast in tea, but the different processing, it changes the health properties. Does it have more antioxidants? Is it better for your heart? Is it better for digestion? Does it have more caffeine? It all depends on the processing. Generally, the least processed, the less caffeine. So white tea also has virtually no caffeine in it. Virtually none. A little bit if you're super sensitive to caffeine, and I mean super sensitive to caffeine, still be mindful, but virtually no caffeine. So white tea is basically just picked and dried, virtually no oxidation. When you start the process of processing tea, however they do it, there's a variety of different ways to do it with different teas, different regions, but generally by the end of the day, you can have a green tea, and you know, there's shaded green teas like Gyokuro. There's different parts of the world where green teas might be a little bit more dry, a little bit more sweet, might be more green. There's certain areas where they will mix toasted and sometimes even popped rice in with the green tea. I love a good genmaicha. Then there's gunpowder, and then there's different grades and qualities of just your standard everyday green tea. I would say most people's idea of what a green tea tastes like would be a sencha. If you've had green tea like in a bottle, or if you've had green tea at a restaurant, you've probably drank a standard sencha. It is just a very popular green tea. It's very delicious, very easy to brew, and the taste of it is just a stereotypical green tea. You're not going into the overtly umami, savory sweetness of a shaded, or when you go to different areas, you're going into something that's a little bit more apricot-y, a little bit more dry, a little bit more robust, a little bit more of a delicate flavor. Or, you know, when I show you the different teas I have, I will mention it. I do like a really good roasted green tea. I don't know what my phone's doing. Oh, telemarketer. We don't care about that. All right, so now that you have your green tea, now if you were to start the oxidation process and have it semi-oxidized but not completely oxidized, you would have an oolong tea. Now people really kind of look over oolong tea. Oolong teas are fantastic. I usually tell people when people would come into the tea store, when I was training people, if people were unfamiliar with oolong tea, I would say, if you've ever gone to a Chinese restaurant, or if you've ever eaten dim sum and you remember being brought those pots of tea, generally, more likely than not, those were oolong teas. A lot of cases, they might also be black teas, but generally, like in a dim sum setting or in Chinese restaurant settings, they would be oolong teas, and generally because they are fantastic for digestion, they taste amazing, they're great. Oolong teas are fantastic. I think I spend the most money on oolong teas, to be completely honest, and that's saying something because I've got like 10 pounds of gyokuro, I think 8 or 10 pounds. I have a lot of that, and that's very expensive too. Now, oolong teas to me have the health benefits and also the flavor qualities of green and black. They have a nice greenness to them, but they have a nice robust body as well. Some of them can be more dry, some of them can be more nutty, some of them can be more light. They actually work beautifully when infused and scented with jasmine. I love it. But for the most part, oolong tea on its own is something beautiful. And I actually really like a very kind of deep, rich, very dark, almost roasted oolong milk tea. It's one of my favorite, like if I'm drinking like a boba tea, it 9 times out of 10 will be like an oolong tea latte or a milk tea. I really like it with milk. It's one of my favorites. Now, if you almost fully oxidize, you're going to have a black tea. Most people's familiarity with black tea is generally like an English breakfast or a Darjeeling. And An English breakfast, in my opinion, is a lower grade of tea leaf when it comes down to like super flowery golden orange to be pico. I'm saying it wrong. I've literally filmed this video so many times. So you'll have to excuse me if I'm saying the grade incorrectly. However, that doesn't mean that it is a bad cup of tea. It is an excellent cup of tea. I do love English breakfast. I am even though I am from the States, I am a PG Tips girl. I have probably 3 giant things of PG Tips tea bags. That is what I will make myself if I am on the go, if I'm running errands and I need to bring tea with me. I will throw a few bags in my giant not Titan Yeti mug, pour some hot water in there, put like a small teaspoon of sugar and some milk, and that's the tea that I drink when I'm going out and about. Is usually like PG Tips. PG Tips is pretty excellent. And it's more of like a British. Tea bags, generally the quality of tea leaves in tea bags, not all the time, sometimes is not the best in regards to quality, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't taste good. But some people do care about the grade of tea, and that's just, again, that's personal preference. There's nothing wrong with enjoying a nice cup of tea with a really good tea bag. I have plenty of tea bags. I also have some very high quality loose leaf tea. It's just whatever I'm in the mood for. Now, black tea is where you will really, in my opinion, this is my opinion, taste the difference when it comes down to processing, elevation, and just the different ways that the tea has just kind of been manipulated in regards to environment. So was it grown in a different part of the world? Was it, when was it picked? How was it picked? Like, because it has such a robust flavor, everything, in my opinion, is more concentrated. You can get a lot of differences in green tea as well, personally. However, I find that in green tea, it's more of the specialties when you're going out and you're looking for specialties grown in different areas. Like I'm looking for like a Pilochun, I'm looking for a special green tea grown in a different area. With black teas, even the more inexpensive black teas, you can tell the difference. Again, this is my opinion. And I think that a lot of that has to do with how in the processing of the leaves, the flavor profiles develop. It's kind of like if you're making a sauce and you use different herbs, if you're only letting the herbs process for like a few minutes, you're not really going to taste it too much. But if you really let those herbs, simmer all day, you're going to really bring out the flavors. And the biggest difference, in my opinion, when it comes down to black tea is the difference between body and the difference between something that's light and effervescent and something that's almost nutty and deep and like woody and oaky. And the 2 great examples are when I'm looking at Darjeeling teas, especially ones that have tips. These are going to be lighter body, I'd say more of a medium body. They're not citrus, so I'm not sitting here saying that they taste like they have any sort of additional flavors a la Earl Grey tea. It's not like they have additional bergamot or orange or spices. It's just that the flavor profile of the tea, the body of the tea when you brew the cup of tea, is lighter and it's fresher and it's zestier and it's more revitalizing. It's the type of cup of tea that you could easily drink without cream and sugar because there's just something about the body and the mouthfeel that's just very enjoyable. It doesn't need the milk and sugar in it. You know how sometimes you have coffee that's a little bit more acidic, a little bit more light, not as oaky. It has more of that livelier body to it. That's what a Darjeeling tea has generally, in my opinion, or at least the more common Darjeeling teas that you could easily find on the market, not maybe going out and trying to track down some of the more expensive higher end ones that you'd have to get from very specialty tea shops where you're spending probably $40 to $50 per ounce for, tea. I'm talking about very expensive. Now, the other tea we're going to mention is Khimum tea. And Khimum tea is a very popular black tea from China, and in my opinion, it is kind of another version of English breakfast. If a lot of people have tried English breakfast, I think also a lot of people are familiar with Keemum black tea. Keemum black tea, I wouldn't say is the exact opposite of Darjeeling, but it does have more deep, fruitier nuances and is a little bit smokier. So it does have more of a medium to heavy body. Some very dark black teas that I love. There is one that is rolled in a ball. That one's almost nutty and sweet and caramel undertones to it. I love that one too, and I'll show you that one in the tea video. That one is fantastic with milk and sugar. And then you have teas that are flavored but not flavored, like a Lapsang Souchong, which we'll talk about, which historically when the teas were being brought back from being traded on caravans, they were actually scented and flavored from the campfires, so they literally taste like campfires, and you guys know how I love smoked wood, and I love it. So those are the tea leaves. But what about pu-erh? So pu-erh is a fermented tea. And I used to have this running just saying I used to say in when I worked at the tea shop. And like I mentioned before, you kind of have to have a palate. You have to develop a palate for white tea because the flavor is so delicate. If you don't have a palate for delicate flavors, it's kind of like when people have a palate for water. They know the difference between bottled waters, or when they drink tap water, they prefer to drink tap water in different zip codes because this person's tap water might taste too minerally, this one tastes a little bit more sweet, this one tastes a little bit stale. You can taste the difference of the water, even though it's water. White tea can come off as very bland, and one of you guys had said it beautifully and perfectly. It's almost like it doesn't have a flavor, it has a smell. It can be very bland, it can smell very stale, but when you develop the palate for it, it has very delicate, nuanced flavors that's very beautiful. Now, pu-erh is the exact opposite. So my saying I used to say is it's fermented, and in some cases, it's fermented in caves, on the coast by the sea. So I used to make jokes that, it tastes like it was, aged in a cave by the sea for like a decade. It is not bad. It is actually quite delicious, and it is so good for your digestion. And as somebody who has digestion issues, gotta love my GI tract. Absolutely not. I live on Oolong and pu-erh teas for the health benefits. Green tea too, and rooibos, but that's a completely different discussion. That's the herbal tea video. So pu-erh has more of, I would say, in my opinion, I'm using this way too much, that term way too much. It is like the oud of teas. It has a funkiness to it that is not off-putting, but if you are not prepared for it, you are like, what is this? So I have little pu-erh cakes that have been aged in mandarin rinds. That's my favorite way. It has just a touch of kind of brightness from the citrus of the rinds. I absolutely love it. But pu-erh it tastes very much umami and vegetal, but also very rich. And it does taste a little funky. It does, but not in a bad way. It is like a blue cheese, or it's like, natto, the soybean, which I actually like. I can't eat it all the time, but I have 2 or 3 cartons in my freezer that when I feel like it, I will eat them. And yes, I do like them. I don't like the texture, but the taste is nice. Don't judge me. But there are some interesting, robust, different flavor profiles in pu-erh tea. And I'm talking about really good pu-erh tea. But bad pu-erh tea is good too. It's a lot easier to palate. It's a great introductory to like a true pu-erh. And what I mean by a true pu-erh, I mean some of these kind of like really fermented, just like more artisan teas. It's fantastic, it's beautiful, it's amazing. There are some fragrances that have pu-erh as a note, and I'm trying to track one down. I've actually considered purchasing 1 or 2 of them. I do have to purchase them from, Asia and see if they can be shipped over here. They haven't been able to be sold anywhere here, so I'd have to buy them and hope that they make it over here. So they are, and it's an underutilized note in perfumery, but I understand. But that's pu-erh tea, and it's considered a black tea, but I would consider it its own category of tea because it is, you know, when we talk about white tea, when we talk about green tea, oolong tea, and black tea, it's a process. This is a whole other process, but it technically is a black tea. Now that we've been talking for like 35 minutes, I'm looking at you, little timer right there. We're getting into the fragrances now. So why did I spend so much time talking about the process? That's because in the process of, you know, getting from white tea to black tea, oolong tea is right in the middle of green and black tea, which means that, like white tea, people could assume that it's just, you know, here I am, just a deeper version of green tea. But it does have its own distinctive way that it smells and tastes, completely separate from green tea. Just like black tea has its own distinctive, unique way it tastes, separate from oolong tea. Now, when I chose these fragrances, I have 6 fragrances. I only own one oolong tea fragrance that I think is the best representation, in my opinion, of a good oolong tea. It doesn't mean that there aren't others out there. It just means in my collection currently, when I was grabbing these fragrances, this was the one that I remembered. Now, when it comes down to black teas, I have 3 examples of distinctive black teas. So I have an example of a Darjeeling, I have an example of a Lapsang Souchong, and I have an example of a Kimum. And then I also have 2 examples of a stereotypical black tea scent, you know, like the green tea fragrance, one very affordable option and one a little bit more of a higher end option. And I wanted to kind of give you guys those recommendations. So I wanted to have some distinctive black teas and also some easy, ready to wear recommendations for you guys. So the first one we're going to talk about is the oolong tea, and you guys probably know which one this is. It's Oolong Cha from Nishané. Now, the reason why I like this one is because, in my opinion, this does not smell like a more oak mossy version of a green tea. And if you think about how oolong tea might smell and might be best represented, the addition of oak moss being a little bit more present, but not in a way that mimics tannic bitterness, but more of that deep greenness, would be a very easy way to mimic oolong tea in fragrances. But I find that this is a little bit more nuanced and a little bit more balanced. If I have reviews of any of these fragrances, I will link them below because I don't want this video to be too long, breaking down the fragrance, the notes, all that stuff, because I do that when I review the scent. But what I like about this is kind of like the stereotypical green tea scent or the stereotypical black tea scent. This is a great just oolong tea scent. There's something refreshing about it. There's something revitalizing about it. And oolong tea does have those qualities in when you smell it. It doesn't feel like it's a ploy and a cheap marketing gimmick like some white teas, because like when you taste white teas, it doesn't even smell the same. Oolong tea does, because it is in between the black and the green. It does have a lot more of the qualities of green tea than white tea has qualities of green tea, like way more connected. So when you smell some of that almost green tea DNA that people are very familiar with, because green tea is very well represented in perfumery, but it doesn't smell like a green tea fragrance. It does have a deeper, richer kind of body to it that feels very well balanced and very well represented as an oolong tea. And I think that the fig helps with that a little bit, and there's a bit of nutmeg in here too that does a really good job. But I do love this fragrance a lot as just a stereotypical oolong tea fragrance. It's excellent. Is it expensive? Yes. But is this probably one of the best and easy to wear representations of an oolong tea fragrance? Yes, one of the best. The best? I don't know because I haven't tried too many. I need to try more, but this is a very good one. Now, before we get into, in my opinion, the more wearable black tea stereotypical. And what I mean by stereotypical, if you close your eyes and you think black tea, what fragrance would you think of? Like if I close my eyes and I think green tea, I would think either Elizabeth Arden green tea or Bulgari Eau de Vert. Those are the two that I would think of because those to me are fantastic green tea fragrances that are wearable and accessible. But I wanted to talk about the distinctive teas first because as I talk about the body and how these are well represented, when I talk about the other tea fragrances, the kind of dumb grabs, the easy to wear ones that just smell like black tea, I think that they will have a little bit more meaning. So the first one I'm going to reference, because I said I was going to reference this, is Kiki. There's also an oolong note in here too that is very present, which is another reason why it's here. But when it comes down to a distinctive black tea note, I really wanted to focus on the Qimum tea. Now again, Qimum is a Chinese black tea and it does have nuances of some, I would say like stone fruit is the best way. It's smoky and a little earthy, just a little earthy. And it has more of a medium body. Now, when you smell it, you're going to smell black tea. Black tea is going to stereotypically smell like green tea, but more robust, more oxidized, more deep, more earthy. But it's still going to have that energizing zestiness that tea has because it's tea. In my honest opinion, the only tea that should not have that energizing zestiness at all is white tea. That's the only one that shouldn't have it. Every other one should have that core, that heart to the accord or note. Because you're going to taste it and you're going to smell it. But not white tea. But that's where they just make it like even brighter. I don't understand why, but if you want to know my gripes about it, watch my white tea video. In any case, you get that little bit of citrusy, kind of zesty tea brightness, but it is paired with a slight smokiness and a slight fruitiness. And what I mean by slight fruitiness, it does not smell fruity or does not taste fruity. It is like, you know, when you have a pink pepper note. Pink pepper, like when you taste it, it's going to burn you if you just eat it. It's very spicy. But it has fruity nuances in the background. And what that does is it helps blend and balance beautifully with woody aromatics, with specific spices, and with florals. So this is a violet fragrance. And fruits really help balance and blend and pair beautifully with violet, but you don't want them to overpower the violet, and Kristy did this beautifully by choosing Qimum tea. And trust me, Kristy and I have had many long conversations about tea, Qimum tea in particular. We've talked forever and chatted and messaged forever about tea. So I know that she specifically chose Qimum tea because of its unique, distinctive smelling and tasting properties of a little bit of smokiness and a little bit of fruitiness to pair with the violet. Now, violet's one of those notes where it can be powdery, it can be soft, it can be aromatic, but when you kind of smell violet, one of the ways that it can smell is almost a little bit fruity candy. It's not that it tastes like fruit, but violets can have almost that grape-esque sort of sweetness in the background. And what the Qimum does is it adds and doesn't detract from the violet's kind of purple-ish sweetness. And it balances everything out and it works. And it's that level of balance that I really enjoy in Kiki. That's really smart, and it's using a distinctive black tea done smartly and in a way where you can smell the black tea note in here and you can smell everything else. So this is a beautiful Qimum tea. I absolutely love it. Obviously, I love it. Again, you all know about this fragrance, so I don't need to talk about it too much. I do need to bring up the other fragrance because you guys know how much I care about tea and you know how much Kristy cares about tea. So obviously on the projects that we worked together, tea was a very important component to scents. And when we were doing She, this was the first collaboration. She was first and foremost supposed to be an oud fragrance that had a very distinctive citrus note. A citrus note that wasn't too strong or too astringent. We wanted it to be sweet. We wanted it to be decadent. We wanted it to be beautiful and delicious and grounding. And she did it beautifully in She. Now, one of the things that I really wanted to do is I wanted a smokiness with the oud. So Lapsang Souchong. Lapsang Souchong, again, is that smoked tea, and it literally just smells like a campfire. It tastes like a campfire. I love it. And it's so beautifully in here. One of my dream fragrances is a very smoky Lapsang Souchong dominant fragrance with a very indolic, I mean almost slimy jasmine note with vanilla, iris, and like a bitter dark chocolate. I want that. That's one of my dream fragrances. And I love She, and that Lapsang Souchong note to me kind of helps tame the oud and makes everything smell beautiful together. It's gorgeous. I absolutely love this fragrance. But again, the Lapsang Souchong here is very distinctive, and it's one of the key elements to balance and blend everything together. On top of the beeswax, I like the beeswax in here too. But again, a distinctive black tea note, and with the creation of those two fragrances, tea was very important, and I do very much care about tea. Now, a fragrance that I think really beautifully captures the lighter body teas, the Darjeeling tea notes, we have Elephant from Zoologist. Now, this definitely smells like more of a shared masculine leaning aromatic fragrance. And I think that when I think about a Darjeeling tea note, it really does pair itself more appropriately with a woody aromatic kind of vetiver, balmy, dry, grassy type of fragrance profile. It works very well that way. I'm not saying that it tastes that way, but its flavor profile and how it would be translated to a scent definitely does, in my opinion, better balances with an aromatic fragrance like this. Now, this fragrance is gorgeous. I love Elephant. I love how this fragrance does have that unique kind of challenging twist that zoologist fragrances have been known to have, but at the same time, it's in no way intimidating or smells like something you would want to scrub off. Some of zoologist fragrances, specifically the older ones or the first ones, have been the type of scents that have been, you know, for people who want to smell a little bit more avant-garde or conceptual. And over time, I think Victor has learned how to balance the wearability with the artistic creativity. And I think one of the first real true testaments to that was Elephant. And the Darjeeling tea note in here was great. It's a light tea note, but it's very distinctive and it's very front and center. And I think if you can understand how Darjeeling tea tastes, and I think a lot of people understand how it tastes, you'll be able to pick it up in this scent, and it just is beautiful. I wouldn't say this is a tea dominant fragrance, but I would say that this fragrance wouldn't be as solid as it is without that distinctive tea note. So those are the distinctive teas, like when we're looking at a Darjeeling, when we're looking at a Kimum, a Lapsang Souchong, and then we also have an Oolong tea in there as well. Well, two, because Kiki has Oolong too, but in my opinion, you can pick up the Oolong tea, but the Kimum tea is more present and more, I would say, its personality shines a little bit more. Now, for these fragrances, these are what I would kind of close my eyes and consider, again, like as a green tea, like Bulgari Eau de Vert, or, you know, Elizabeth Arden green tea, like a stereotypical, what would somebody consider a black tea fragrance that they could just spray on and walk away. Now, when people think of black tea, they think of Earl Grey. That's a very popular flavored black tea. It's flavored with bergamot, and it is beautiful. And I love the black tea note and the addition of bergamot in Demeter's Earl Grey tea. For a really expensive, cheapy fragrance, I think this bottle, this size is like 20 bucks. This is a fan-frickin-tastic black tea scent. They have other black tea scents that are really, really good, but I do want a bit of brightness in my tea fragrances, except for my white tea fragrances. Please, no. Or Lapsang Souchong. I would like smokiness, please and thank you. But in a black tea fragrance, I want a tiny bit of that leafy brightness, that kind of energizing greenness. And in green teas and in oolong teas, the addition of ognamos really does help add that kind of photorealistic authenticity. But in black teas, if you're not using a distinctive tea note like a Darjeeling, you can utilize that brightness and kind of help it smell a little bit more authentic by just saying, let's make an Earl Grey tea fragrance, and it is here. So their black tea note in here is fabulous. It smells like a really nice, easy to wear black tea. It's basically the best way I can say it. But the bergamot in here is beautiful. It's bright and crisp and slightly creamy. So what I mean when I say creamy is, like, for some people when they drink an Earl Grey tea, they drink it with cream and sugar. So the smell of bergamot might trigger kind of the olfactive memory of milk. And so they might think to themselves, whenever I smell this citrus, I taste something bright and citrusy and creamy. And so it kind of might mimic something slightly lactonic, which is why I think bergamot is a very, it's like the mayonnaise of opening notes. You can really use it in just about anything. It can be overutilized and it can be quite safe and lazy. But in this situation, since it is supposed to be an Earl Grey tea, I think it does its job beautifully in a way that's very wearable. This is a great scent. This doesn't smell too feminine. This doesn't smell too masculine. This is a very shared fragrance. I think it is stunning. Again, $20, full retail price. You cannot go wrong if you're looking for a good black tea scent. Now, if you're the type of person where you want something more elevated, something that has a little bit more thought and artistry put into it, but still very wearable, Atelier Cologne's Filtre Ceylon is gorgeous. This is a Ceylon tea, and this does have the addition of mint and a variety of other aromatics that mimic, again, this kind of beautiful, very transportive black tea scent. I think that this fragrance, when it comes down to the idea of what black tea should smell like, again, not like a distinctive black tea, but if I had to think of a fragrance that best represented my idea of what a good black tea scent would be, in every situation it would be this one, because it does have aromatics, it does have brightness, it does have a bit of earthiness, it does have a coolness to it, but it does have a body to it. And all of that comes together, but you're left with this very gorgeous, very handsome, very attractive tea fragrance. And it is a tea fragrance front and center, and it is a black tea fragrance. And that's what I enjoy. So this to me is kind of like the Bulgari Eau de Vert of black tea fragrances. If you're looking for a black tea scent and you just want something that you can spray on your body and walk away and smell amazing, but you don't want green tea, you want black tea, Filtre Ceylon is excellent. And I do like the addition of mint in here. I think it just works really well to kind of make it a little bit cool and crisp and adds that nice touch of clarity that works really well in a scent. And this is just really sexy. This is also, of all the fragrances, aside from Elephant, more of a shared masculine leaning fragrance, but anyone can wear it. It's really, really good. So if you were to try any fragrance from this list, if you were looking for a tea scent, based off of price and based off of longevity and performance, I think this one's the best. I also really like She and Kiki personally, but these are all excellent picks in my opinion, but a great representation of what I'm talking about of a black tea fragrance would be Filtre Ceylon from Atelier. At the end of the day, black tea and oolong tea I find to be properly represented in perfumery, unlike white tea, which I find to be not properly represented. White tea, again, like I mentioned before, is a little bit on the riskier side because I think wanting to smell like stale socks is probably not how people want to go, but I did mention in that video, if you tried to be more ozonic, minerally, and dusty with a bit of brightness, it probably would be perfect. However, black tea and oolong teas are properly represented, but I wish that they would be more represented, specifically distinctive teas. I see a lot of lapsang souchong in tea notes when I see a black tea, and I think that's fantastic, but I would love to see perfumers and noses and houses really start to celebrate more distinctive, maybe geographically located different types of teas, because again, elevation has a huge thing to do with it, how it's grown, different parts of the world, and really showcasing and basically shining a light and celebrating these beautiful teas that just shine and work so well on fragrance. It's very late, so I'm obviously having a hard time talking, so thank you guys for your patience. But I do not think that black tea and oolong tea are improperly represented, but I think that they need to be more represented in perfumery, and I'm excited to see what more people do with this amazing note. I would also love to know what favorite fragrances you guys have with black tea and oolong tea notes. There is a brand called, I think, J-Scent that does a hojicha tea, I cannot say that, I can't even say anything today, which is a roasted tea. I might buy that after I get this video edited and uploaded, just because I need that fragrance in my life. They also have a ramune fragrance, which I am also very interested, so we'll see if I pick those up. But I'd love to know what oolong tea fragrances and black tea fragrances you guys enjoy. They could be distinctive teas, they could just be easy to wear teas that have a beautiful black or oolong tea note, or if you guys have any fantastic pu-erh tea notes. Let me know those in the comment section below. I'm always looking to add new tea fragrances to my collection. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I will be continuing the tea discussion before my big tea video with herbal teas, specifically sharing a spotlight on mate and rooibos, specifically mate and rooibos teas. But if you guys have any questions or any specific recommendations on herbal tea scents, let me know in the comment section below. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. Bye.